Hi, welcome back to Living the Questions. I am really excited about today's conversation. It was inspired by editing the first few episodes, which is a really interesting place to be. If anyone has ever edited anything, especially if you're editing something of yourself, you know that you have to watch it several times and hear things over and over and over again. And when that is you that you're editing, it's really interesting what comes up. It's really interesting to have an experience about yourself and about the relationship you have with yourself. So, something that I noticed for me was that initial question that I talked about living into that started this podcast, which is what does it look like to let your voice become? And part of what I'm noticing in that journey is there is a tape deck in my mind that has some sort of old narrative that speaks to this insecurity, I imagine is what I'll call it, of do I make sense? And I think living into this initial question looks like having these moments where I'm editing my own voice and I have something come up that continues to question whether or not I make sense to anyone and is highly critical of myself. And that's a really interesting place to be, especially because it can feel like when that voice is speaking, that is just truth. That is just gospel. And it's fascinating to me as I'm exploring it in terms of a question to live into, because what was coming up for me as I was diving into these edits and noticing that that was happening was I started to see it as like it okay, so it was something that felt very real the first time through, but due to the fact of editing, you have to continue to go back and continue to listen and continue to hear the same thing over and over again. And when I heard it the second or third time, I heard my own voice very differently than I did the first time. And so what I started to recognize was it felt similar to what is described as, like seeing things through rose-colored glasses. I'm noticing that insecurity does something like that. It puts on a different lens that I'm seeing things through, that I'm hearing things through, that muddles and muddies things, um, and and creates a distortion that isn't necessarily reality, but there's something internal that's happening that feels very much like reality. And so when I'm listening to that first episode and insecurity or the harsh inner critic inside of me comes into play, it puts on that distortion cap because it is all the senses. And it is as if I can only hear it through the distortion. It's like I cannot hear it any other way. I'm not actually hearing what I'm saying. I'm not actually hearing what is in reality. Um, and that's funny too, because right, we all have our own different lived realities at any given time. But I'm not living in the what is. I am only getting to hear things through this distortion, unbeknownst to me. And so, what that sounds like is only getting to see or hear the criticism. And it turns into, um, yeah, it turns into that piece that I feel like I'm going to have to do a mega episode on, which is routing through another. The this safety of routing through another. There are so many reasons why that feels like safety, and why that would come to be a habit or a protective mechanism. And in this instance, it's really interesting because the way that it routes itself is the distortion cap is on and and I'm hearing myself through that. And the thing that's being said to me internally is, you don't make any sense. You are this, you are that, all of these critical things. And what I'm hearing that through isn't in my own voice, it's through another person's experience. Imagined, but this is me thinking of another person's experience where I'm thinking of somebody listening. And in that, I'm witnessing a whole thing play out of a person not being able to understand and not being able to clarify because it is a podcast. So you can't ask me for the clarification in real time. You can definitely ask me. You can send me an email and ask me. You can comment and ask me clarifying questions. And in that moment, none of that clarity is there. It just is the criticism of the reason why it has taken me a long time to start using my voice, likely, are these types of things. And so this distortion cap, and I like to call it a cap since it's all sensory, is really interesting because when I listened the second time and the third time through when I was editing, I didn't hear myself the same way anymore. That first time, distortion cap, the equivalent to rose-colored glasses in a totally different way. And the second time, none of that was on. I can't even tell you exactly why it wasn't on. It just was different. And without those distortion elements and getting to actually be with what is, I heard myself differently. I heard myself make sense to me. I heard myself actually from a non-critical space. And it was really interesting. And a lot of times, what I noticed was I could only really get there before when it was routed through another person again. So if someone heard something that I shared and was able to communicate in some way, shape, or form, whether that was something that I was sharing vocally or something that I wrote, and someone shared how it impacted them, then all of a sudden it was as if the distortion cap dissolved and I no longer saw or heard or read my own voice as, in that critical way. I no longer had that in between me and how I viewed these things. It was like one person could say something about it, and that helped melt this distorted facade. And that's so curious to me. And so in this instance, not having that other person to route through and having it be me that gave myself that before anyone has ever heard any of these episodes, any of these verbal shares. It's so interesting to me that it is something that blocks and that it is something that can dissolve, which means that it isn't tied into the reality of what is. And what's interesting is what is could be that I don't make sense to someone, could be that there is more clarification needed, could be that I think that I'm saying, I think that I'm expressing myself more clearly than I actually am. And what then? And so sitting with that curiosity of living into letting yourself not make sense to everyone, letting yourself figure out what it looks like to share vulnerably, to share honestly, to use your voice and have it be bandy-legged and honed over time. Because again, it's new, and stepping into anything new, we're unskilled at it. And that doesn't mean that I haven't used my voice before. However, it does mean that this is a new way of using it. And so, whatever that may mean to you in the question that you're living into, where that distortion cap may be coming into your life, in your world, yeah, what does it look like to give yourself grace in those moments, to even have the space to recognize that there is distortion happening, and to let that be its own experience for a second. I don't know what that looks like really, because I can't exactly tell you what got me from the moment of being in the self-criticism with that distortion cap and hearing it differently. There's an openness there for sure. There's an openness that exists due to the fact that I said yes to doing this podcast. Um, there's something there that's helping me click in real time to give myself that grace. And it doesn't mean that the critical experiences that have blocked me in the past just melt away. They're still very much there. I still very much am in that, that continued spectrum. I talk about the unconscious incompetence to unconscious competence spectrum. I am in living questions. We all are in that first 3-stage space until we get to the unconscious competence. And so I feel like with this one, I'm finding myself in the conscious, somewhere between the unconscious incompetence and the conscious incompetence, tap dancing my way towards conscious competence. And it's okay that it takes time. It doesn't feel good, and it's not necessarily an enjoyable thing to be in, because it does feel like it feels heavy, because it really can feel like I am hearing someone else. I will not now put out this episode due to the fear of what I'm projecting someone may or may not actually have and think about what I'm sharing. Um, and I'm not giving then myself the opportunity to know anything different or to change that narrative and dissolve the distortion cap. So it's interesting that it requires, like, living the questions really requires us to step into tension and discomfort in ways that they are sort of the only option if we want to change how we've done things. If it's not working for us anymore to continue the way that we have before. Um, yeah, that part is really interesting. And it's interesting that it keeps coming back to this routing through another, and that comes up again and again in all of these pieces. That safety of routing in another, even though almost every time the other is imagined. Because even if the other is real and we're routing through them in real time, yeah, I think even then we're creating a version of that person in our mind. We're creating something that's not necessarily what's happening in the moment. And maybe it is, right? This is big discernment. But the example that I have, and I can't remember if I've told this before, so here we go. If we repeat, we repeat. But my dear friend and I were we were camping in Big Sur, and we were on the coastline, that gorgeous, somewhat pretty intimidating coastline, and drove down to see this beautiful waterfall that I had been to once before, and it is majestic nonetheless every time. And there was this gorgeous sunset. We just happened to be there at the right time to see the sunset. And so as we're watching the sun set over the west coast on these beautiful cliffs, my friend and I were just standing there, and it's so beautiful. And all of a sudden, I am realizing the sun is about to go down, and we still have about a 20-30 minute drive back to our campsite. And I start thinking about it, and I'm like, oh, it's going to get dark. It's going to be hard to see. And, those roads are windy. Let me ask her if if she wants to head back or watch the sunset here, like wants to head back because of all of those reasons, or watch the sunset here. And so I asked her that very question, and she said, "You know what? It doesn't really matter to me. I'm happy to stay here and watch the sunset. But if you want to head back because because of the the windy roads and things, I'm happy to do that." And in that moment, I was trying to still figure out where she was at. It was like I could not make a decision for myself. I could only see it through what would be, like she was driving, so would she feel safe driving that route? And we ended up talking about it, and she had brought to the surface this really powerful mirror to me that I couldn't see in the moment, which was that it was really me that was feeling the anxiety about the drive, and that she was telling me that she was fine either way. But that what I could say to her in that moment, even though I didn't have access to it at the time, but what I could say to her in that moment is, I'm feeling weary about the windy road going back as the sun sets. Could we go before the sun fully sets so that I I don't feel anxious on the drive home? I couldn't tell you that that's actually what I had in the moment. What I had in the moment was, I want my friend to enjoy this time, and I don't want her to be worried about driving. What really was going on for me, although for sure in my head, this is not what I knew was going on, was in my body, I had anxiety coming up thinking about that drive, and it routed through my friend. It routed through her, and then I could I could access it. It was like, if it was coming up for me, forget it. It's not like that didn't matter. But if it's for her, then I could speak to it. I could say it. So for me, I was able to justify that option if I said that that was something that was going on for her. I didn't realize that I wasn't giving myself the option to say that that's something that was going on for me, so much so that I didn't know that that was what was going on for me. And yet my actions were causing me to to come from that place. And so it was really fascinating because if you had asked me in real time, I would have said, no, 100%. I'm just asking you which one you feel more comfortable with. And in retrospect, when my friend brought up what she mirrored back to me, what was coming up for her when she was in that experience, and getting to see that, like, it was actually me speaking from what I had, I realized, oh yeah, that is what I had. What I really did have was that I was nervous and I wanted to head back. And why was there such a distance there? And so that question, I feel like I'm living deeply into that question of what does it look like to bridge that? Not anything, not like even a why is that happening? Because there's a million reasons why that could be happening. And I have pretty good guesses of where some of these things stem from. But what I can tell is that it's well practiced to the point where it's unconscious for me. And I want to care for people deeply from a deep space of care and not mix that up with a routing of my own self-abandonment. I wanna be able to say, "This is" like, unconditional positive regard, "This is what I have going on for me. I'm feeling a little nervous. I think I'm wanting to head back. I'm also feeling like I really am enjoying the sunset, and I don't wanna take that away from you. Is it important to you for us to stay here? Can we find a middle ground?" Um, Something along those lines. Again, I didn't have access to that then, so there was no option for that to happen, and now, learning that, I do feel like I'm going to, having my friend generously gift that mirroring back to me, I feel like I'm in my next instance where this occurs, I I feel like I will be more in the conscious incompetence space or conscious yeah, I'll still probably be in the conscious incompetence space where I'll probably catch it just after it happens. Um, or maybe I'll catch it in real time and I'll have like a sense of competence to it. I'll have an idea of being able to offer UPR, the unconditional positive regard, to myself and to another, in real time. And can I give myself big heaps of grace and gentleness and patience? Because that's a huge bridge to build. It's clear to me that I have not recognized the ways that I have very readily pushed my needs and what's coming up for me a lot of the time aside, and it's trying to find its way, right? It's trying to route through another person to feel like it's something that I can honor and own and see even. And that makes me realize, the inner child in me, the inner yeah, that inner being that has been abandoned in the past is doing whatever feels safest and most comfortable to it for me to see it and acknowledge it because it really does need to be seen and acknowledged. And that's a tender, long process. And so I feel like, yeah, getting that gift of seeing that, getting that gift of that seeing the routing experience helps. That is like another form of a distortion cap that I was talking about before. And what happens when I remove the reroute? What's really here? I think like all of those questions are curious, oh, needing so much compassion questions. And I'm I'm really interested in them. They are very uncomfortable in real time, somatically speaking, in the body. There's a lot of anxiety tied to them from my personal experience, and again, that feels like protection and also wisdom from the body that I'm getting to learn more about myself, to learn my yeses and my nos, to learn my needs, to learn how to protect myself, what boundaries and guardrails are needed that haven't been, to learn how to value and honor and respect my own voice, my own being, and and not just if another acknowledges and values it, to do that myself. Um, Maybe not always first, but to get to a place where it becomes that I am able to do that for myself first. It's an interesting navigation. And all of these conversations, all of these pieces are interconnected. Um, yeah, there's just so much here. As I was, as I keep saying, as I said in the very first trailer of this podcast, it's there are so many questions here, questions inside of the questions, layers inside of the layers. And I'm really excited to keep diving into them. And I'm really grateful to be doing this podcast to watch the way that things unfold, even within these conversations. This this podcast itself is creating the journey of living ways into answers. Um, and the goal isn't to arrive at any one specific destination. It is to continually arrive and remain curious, to continually, yeah, honor where we are and all the different perspective shifts that we're able to have and open ourselves up to and heal and discover and explore all these different human parts of ourselves. Yeah, that's the journey, and I'm really grateful to be here and on it with you. So that's what I've got for today. Who knew that editing a podcast would bring up even more questions? I feel like deep down I did know that, but I discovered it in real time. So yeah, here's to more. Here's to more of the journey. I am really grateful to be here with you on it. And I'm recording these prior to getting to share them. So in that, I genuinely am looking forward to hearing, yeah, what comes up for you as you are listening to these conversations. And yeah, and what your experience is with your own voice, with your journey, with your voice, your journey with the questions that are coming up for you as you hear this, which might be totally different questions. Like one thing I say may actually spark something in you that is a different question for you that just, it illuminated it for you. And I would be so curious what those questions are, because we all live different ones or different shapes and textures of similar ones. So I'm very excited to hear what yours are, and I look forward to learning your voice alongside my own. Thank you for being here, and I will see you next time.